Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to deal with the plague of the frogs. And I'm coming off of the last video, which talked about the plague of water. And I mentioned in the last video that Christians have absolutely no idea what God intended to do by sending the plagues to Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And so I'm going to do those things, and I'm really going to dig in just a little bit further and reiterate some things from the last video, and then I will discuss the purpose for God sending the plague of frogs. Acts 7:22, and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in words and in deeds. In the last video on the plague of water, I explained the purpose for that plague. The plague of water sets the tone for everything that God has done and will do in our time. I told you that Moses understood the things that God was telling him to do because he had knowledge of the wisdom of the Egyptians. And if you don't know what the wisdom of the Egyptians is, you need to get a little bit of education, I would say, in that area. Now, I'm going to provide some things because the wisdom of the Egyptians, the most important aspect of that is dealing with the gods of Egypt. Moses and the sons of Jacob were living like Egyptians, though their origin is from Shem. However, they believed in the gods of the ancient Babylonians and the ancient Egyptians. That will be clear, or at least I thought I made myself clear about that in the first video. The Egyptians were a major target for God. They are the source of the distortion of the truth, and the Pharaoh considered himself to be king of all the world. Pharaoh believed, at least what I see, that he was the man that God talks about in Genesis 1:26. That man is said to have dominion over all the earth. And so Pharaoh believed that he was that man, just like many of you believe you are that man, but have little dominion over the sins that you continue to commit every single day, even as so-called Christians. God fully intended to mock the Egyptians and their belief system concerning Pharaoh and their gods. God fully intended to use the knowledge of Moses, the knowledge that Moses possessed, in order to mock the Pharaoh and the Egyptians whom Pharaoh shepherded. That's another imagery that you find in the writings of the prophets, in the writings of Moses and the apostles. Pharaoh considered him the shepherd, and his flock was the Egyptians. God also intended to teach the sons of Israel about himself. So God used the information that Moses gathered, Moses was taught, to teach the sons of Israel, the sons of Jacob, is which I prefer to call them, about himself. So he used the imagery of the Egyptians to teach them about the birth, the death, and the resurrection of Yahushua HaMashiach. And Yahushua HaMashiach Jesus Christ stated that in the book of John, the Gospel of John, excuse me, in the Gospel of John, Yahushua stated, Jesus Christ stated, Moses wrote about me. And in the course or the series of these videos leading up to the Passover, I intend on showing you some things that Moses wrote about Yahushua HaMashiach, because it's there. It's just hidden in parabolic imagery. Joshua 24:14 says this. So now you fear Yahuwah, and you serve him guiltlessness and in truth, and you must depart from the gods that your father served on the other side of the river, that's Babylon, and in Mitzrayim, and you serve Yahuwah. Moses was not the only one, as I've stated in the last video, and I'm stating in this video, and I will state time and time again, that Moses was not the only one who, before his encounter with the one true God at the burning bush, believed in the gods of Egypt. Moses believed in the gods of Egypt, and the sons of Jacob believed in the gods of Egypt. The sons of Israel were worshiping the gods of the Egyptians. This is evident by the male bull they asked Aaron to make with the gold they received from the Egyptians as they partook in the mass exodus. I told you that the sons of Israel are an example of what the Egyptians believed concerning the gods of Egypt. I told you that the sons of Israel believed that the male bull, the one that Aaron created, even though Aaron only made one god, that male bull was the gods, plural, who brought them out from the Egyptians. And I spoke in detail about that in the last video, and I'll speak in a little more detail about that in this video. Moses knows that the Egyptians believed in one God who manifested himself in many physical forms. That's why the main god of the Egyptian pantheon could be Osiris, or he could be the sun god, or he can be Horus, the son of Osiris, or he can be Osiris. That one God who was invisible was many gods in physical form. It is the same God they believed is invisible, and Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 1, because the Egyptians were distorting the truth about the one true God. That's what the Egyptians were doing. And Paul talks about that here. This is what Paul says. For the wrath of God is made known from heaven against all profane and injustice of mankind, who are detaining the truth in a pronouncement of guilty. Your King James Bible says this, but I translate the Greek word as a pronouncement of guilty. Unrighteousness is a pronouncement of guilty, but they are detaining the truth in a pronouncement of guilty, meaning that they are detaining the truth in a lie. In a lie. Because that which was understood concerning God, notice what it says here, that which was understood concerning God, they understood things concerning God, is made known in them. The truth was made known in them, for God showed it to them. What did God show them? He showed them the truth that they were detaining in a pronouncement of guilty. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world, the invisible things of him, God, heaven, God's realm, you can't see it. And the Egyptians could not see it, which is why they sought to describe God in the physical things that they described him in, because they could not see God. The sons of Jacob, the sons of Israel, and I prefer to call them the sons of Jacob, did the very same thing when they wanted a God that they can see. They wanted to be able to see their king, so they rejected God in order to get a king that they can see. That was them bringing God into the physical world, because they wanted to be like the nations. They wanted to be like the Egyptians. They wanted to be like the Babylonians. They wanted to be like the Syrians. They wanted to be like the Canaanites. They wanted to be like all the nations who had a king that claimed that they had dominion over all the earth. And so the sons of Jacob, my Hebrew Israelite brothers, they distorted the truth and wanted a God or a king in whom they can see, because Yahuwah is there. Yahuwah claims to be our king. That's his claim. King. Let me find my place here. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly viewed, being understood by the things that are made, even eternal power and divine nature, so that they are without excuse. Because after knowing God, they did not acknowledge him as God, neither were they grateful, but they were futile in their imaginations, and they were darkened in their unintelligent heart. Professing to be wise ones, they became asinine, and they changed, watch this, the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and of birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. So they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God. God is light. God is not the light of the sun, because God created the sun on the fourth day. God is light. And they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image of corruptible man, that's Pharaoh, and of birds, that's the soul of any that goes into the underworld, and four-footed beast, that's the male bull that Aaron created when Moses was on the mountain and stayed for a very long time, and creeping things. So the Egyptians believed in one God who was invisible, that is, he could not be seen. So they made him in the image of corruptible man, birds, and four-footed beasts and creeping things. The Egyptians distorted the truth about the one true God and made him in the image of that male bull, the physical manifestation of the sun god Ra. It doesn't matter what name they called that male bull. It is the same invisible God that they are trying to bring from the invisible realm into the physical realm. Why? because they knew the truth and they detained the truth in unrighteousness. Because the truth talks about how God was going to come down from heaven to reconcile the world. This is the truth that was hidden for ages. So it's no secret. So when you hear people talk about the Bible is copying off of other religions that talk about the same thing, no, the other religions just distorted the truth that they heard, that the sons of Noah heard. They distorted the truth, and they did not acknowledge the one true God, and they made the one true God into the image of corruptible man, birds, or four-footed beasts with bird wings. You look on the Babylonian walls, you look on the Assyrian walls, you look on the Egyptian walls, they all are doing the same things. They all are guilty of distorting the truth. For the Egyptians, Ra is the most important deity in their pantheon of gods. He went by several names. He went by the name Ra. He went by the name of Amun Ra, Ptah Ra, or Ra Harakti. And it doesn't matter which form of God that was in the physical realm out of all of these gods I just named, it was the same God who was invisible. They distorted the truth. The name of this invisible God that the Egyptians, believed is called Neb-er-Tcher. Neb-er-Tcher. For the Egyptians, Neb-er-Tcher is the invisible God. And excuse me to all my Egyptologists and to all my Kemetic believers if I botched up the pronunciation of the name Neb-er-Tcher. But Neb-er-Tcher is the invisible God who was alone before the creation of heaven and earth. That's what the Egyptians believe. And he created himself. Some translations say he evolved himself, which means the same thing as Khepera. Khepera is the beetle that was rolling dung along the sands of the desert. But that God, Khepera, is the light of the sun at dawn. So he's the sun god Ra, just another manifestation of the sun god Ra. His name is Khepera. Neb-er-Tcher created himself as a part of his creation. That's what the Egyptians believe, as Khepera at the beginning of all time. This is found in a hymn. And when he says at the beginning of all time, well, at the beginning of all time, you take time in 24-hour increments. That is the first day. The name Khepera means to come into being. So Neb-er-Tcher, the invisible God of creation, came into being on the first day of creation, and his name is Khepera, who is the first light seen at dawn. He is the same God in two different forms, invisible and physically seen as the light that appears at dawn. That is Khepera and Neb-er-Tcher. So I just gave you the same invisible God being two different forms of himself. That's what the Egyptians believed. The invisible God made himself seen as the light of the dawn. This is what the Egyptians believed. But he also calls himself Osiris, or for the Greeks, Osiris. Now, I have shown you the main Egyptian trinity. And that trinity is not one God in three persons. That trinity is one God in three different forms: Neb-Etcher, Khepera, and Osiris. I believe I read a hymn in the last video showing you what they believe. And they all are the same God for the Egyptians, but the Egyptians distorted the truth about true God who created heaven and earth. And it wasn't Neb-Etcher. The sons of Jacob understood this about God, which is why they called that singular bull that Aaron created their plural gods that brought them up out of Egypt. Go back and look at the evidence. It's there. Aaron made one God. In fact, the pronouns are him in the very statement. Him. So Aaron created one male bull that was many gods for the Israelites that came out of the Exodus. And they believed that because they got it from the Egyptians. Go back to Joshua 24, and you'll see that Joshua tells them to put away the gods beyond the river and the gods in Egypt, the same ones that their fathers were worshiping. So even up to the time that they were about to go into the promised land, Joshua had to tell them to put away these gods. Moses understood this as well because he was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. The Egyptians made the image of the one true God like corruptible man and birds and four-footed beasts, which is why Aaron made Ra, who is Khepera, who is both Osiris and Neb-Etcher, into a male bull. That male bull is the most important god of Egypt. You can find some of this in the hymn of the Book of Knowing, the evolutions of Ra, and the overthrowing of Apepi. This is found in the Hieratic Papyrus of Nisi Su. Look it up. It's there. I have a copy myself. Knowing that Moses was educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians, you will see that God had plans to use that information as his source of mocking. As his source of mocking. The Egyptians were the recipients of God's wrath because they distorted the truth by making him a part of multiple aspects of his creation. God called himself, now watch this, God called himself Yahuwah, however you want to pronounce it, Yahweh or Jehovah, for a reason. The reason is found in the meaning of his memorial name. Much like Khepera, which means to come into being, the tetragrammaton is the third person masculine singular imperfect form of Hebrew, of the Hebrew noun Yahuwah, and it means he will be. That is no coincidence. God did not do that by accident. God made his name. If you are confused, about that, let me see here. If you are confused about that, or about why God, the one true God who says that he is the only God and there is no other, why he would call himself Yahuwah or he will be, it is because he plans to mock the ancient religions by coming from the invisible realm into the physical realm. They distorted the truth. God came mocking them. God took the name El, not because he is El of the Canaanite pantheon. Look it up. El and Elohim comes from the Canaanite pantheon and the Canaanite assembly of gods. And God used the name. In fact, he told Moses that he only made himself known to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob by the name of El Shaddai. But by my name, Yahuwah, he made himself known to the sons of Jacob. All right, let's see. I lost my place. However, he, that is God, plans to reconcile the world in the process. So he planned to come into the physical realm, from the invisible realm into the physical realm, and he plans to reconcile the world in the process. The ancient religions had no literal ground for believing that the God which they distorted was an image of corruptible man, birds, and four-footed beasts. Absolutely no grounds for believing that, other than the fact that they willingly chose to distort the truth. And that's because on the other side of the actual flood, the flood that Noah was blessed to escape, him and his sons, his house, they were already and had already distorted the truth, which is why God destroyed the entire world at that time with water. So God mocked them, the Egyptians, by using their imagery to conceal the truth in parabolic images, parabolic statements, and idiomatic phrases, idioms. The only physical image that one can contribute to God is Yahushua Hamashiach. And that is because God was mocking the Egyptians and the ancient mystery religions. Yahushua Hamashiach is said to be the image of God, which God created in a mocking, taunting act against all mystery religions. But the thing that Trinitarians fail to understand is that God brought into reality what the ancient religions falsely claimed. That is, the one true God who is invisible came into the body of flesh that he spoke into reality. He spoke it into reality, which is the point of the angel, the Greek word angelos, or the Hebrew word malak or malek, which means messenger. It means messenger. And people think of angels as little babies with wings or some white person with wings. No, they're messengers. And what do messengers do? Messengers do the same thing that those bike messengers that you would find pedaling their bike in Manhattan, trying to get to the location to deliver the